Welcome to Tweener Madness, the high-stakes startup showdown where 8 promising companies go head-to-head for a $25,000 investment prize from the Triangle Tweener Fund. But before the competition kicks off, let's meet the people making the tough calls, the judges. In this special Meet the Judges episode, we're sitting down with the investors and industry leaders who will be asking the hard-hitting questions, evaluating the startups, and ultimately deciding who moves forward in this bracket-style competition. Each round, 3 judges will vote on which startups advance, leading up to the finals in early April, where one company will take home the top prize. From the judges, you'll hear about their backgrounds, what they look for in a winning startup, and maybe even get a little inside scoop on their decision-making process. So, if you're a founder looking for investment, an entrepreneur curious about what investors really want, or just someone who loves a good business battle, you are in the right place. Let's meet the judges. Here's your host, Scot Wingo.
Hello, everybody. I am Scot Wingo, your master of ceremonies for Tweener Madness, and I am joined here by one of our elite selection committee members, Anthony Rotoli.
Hey, Scott, how are you? Thanks for having me today. Looking forward to this. This is going to be exciting. Obviously looking at Tweener Madness and everything else that's going on with Tweener. I'm really excited for this.
Awesome. We appreciate you stepping up to be on the selection committee. You and I have known each other for feels like forever at this time. I can't even place a decade, but give folks a little biography of who is this Anthony Rotoli guy.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know me, obviously, Scott, now we go back, it's close to 25 years, I think, or so. Now it's been a while. I've spent over 30 years in the software markets over the course of my career. It's hard to say that sometimes, just knowing how long I've been doing this. Over the last 15 years, 3-time CEO, worked with many private equity companies. We can talk, a little bit at that, just with some of the things I've seen there. But the last 25 years I've spent here in the Triangle. Spent a lot of time in a galaxy far, far away with a man named Scot Wingo at Channel Advisor way back when. We have funny stories that we could probably talk about another time for that. But most recently, I've been serving as the CEO of Ocelot, a AI student engagement platform, and I'm spending a lot of time now investing and looking at some other opportunities for helping advising and mentoring. The long and the short of it, most of my career now has really been built around how do we build and scale the companies that are coming up into the entrepreneurial world, and working with firms like the ones that we're going to see here and people that are trying to get off the ground is really kind of the current focus of things that I've been working on, and trying to advise and be on boards and help with ventures and working with people like yourself now in different capacities across that. So super high level, but I've been doing this now for 30 years in the software world, and have learned a lot along the way.
Cool. Yeah. And then you've kind of made, so you were at Channel Advisor, then you went to CDW. You were in kind of like the tech space for a while. And then
I was in
kind of narrowed
for a while.
Yep,
back in the early days.
Yeah.
So I've made the rounds.
Then you kind of narrowed in on ed tech, and you've what'd you do before Ocelot? That's another.
Yeah. So before Ocelot, there were a couple companies before that. So I ran another SaaS company in the ed tech space called ESM for about 8 years. I ran another one here locally called Teradata for about 4 years. And then eventually had joined Ocelot here, all within the private equity realm. And there's a lot of things that you learn inside of that private equity world. So having left CDW and kind of went in to become the CEO roles, I will tell you, Scott, this is the one thing, especially when it comes to advising companies, that are important to me on really building a good foundational business. Good foundational businesses usually have good foundational exits. And so, those are going to be, I think, some things that are super important as a part of that. And, spending, a year or so now here at Ocelot in the AI student engagement platform, which has really been an interesting, change, because as we all know, AI didn't exist until 2 years ago, even though that's not the truth. But now everybody knows what AI is and what AI can bring. And actually having built and scaled and grown a company in that space, it's really intriguing to see what people are trying to do with those techs. But yeah, so over the last, several years, I've kind of been at a few of the companies here locally, but also spent time now over the last close to 15 years in that ed tech space.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw it or not, but I put out a Tweener Times yesterday where there's now 8 transactions in the triangle. It's most of them end up being strategic, but my understanding is a lot of them started with an inbound PE,
Yeah.
and then folks started a process, and then ultimately a strategic stepped up and was able to pay more than a PE.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised by that. It's the market's getting really active right now. And a lot of things that I'm seeing, not only people that are looking to sell, but the entities out there that are really trying to buy. And it's 2025 is going to be an interesting year compared to I think what we saw last year.
Yeah, in the triangle, at least we're having a little boomlet or a wave of acquisitions, which is I know the local investors are very happy. So
I'm sure they are. I've seen some of those transactions, and there's been some pretty good ones. And knowing a bunch of the companies and knowing being part of the network here for as long as you and I have been, it's really cool to kind of see these exits starting to come to fruition. For a lot of people, it takes, and this is one of the things for the people that are listening today too. It takes a lot of work to get things to these places, and it's not an overnight success, kind of things as we all wish they would be. But it's really cool now that to your comment, like and I did see the article, the fact that we've had 8 so far this year, and it's mid-February.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's really crazy what the year is going to kind of shake out to be.
Yeah, we'll run out of companies if we keep this pace up. So I don't think it's not going to say the same.
I don't know, good or bad.
Yeah. So so you've got a deep operational experience, and you're starting to do more helping companies. You're doing some board work. You're an LP in the Tweener Fund, which we appreciate. Anything else? Are you writing individual checks, or do you try to do it more through the
I'm trying
fund, or
to
what you're
do
doing?
mostly through kind of like the Tweener Fund and things like that. But I am starting to explore some of the individual check routes. I'll tell you, just from an investment background, in particular with myself, I also I'm very hands-on and want to be able to roll up my sleeves. And this is where some of the board work that I've been doing is really paying off. Because I can add a lot of strategic value in that operational sense. Then it's just, hey, here's some money. Good luck. We're all counting on you. And especially when you've kind of gone through the organizations that I've gone through with these private equity kind of backed funds, I know what they're looking for at the end of the day, which is also what strategics are looking for when they're trying to buy. And we all don't want to sell low, right? We want to sell it high. And so for me, it's more than just the capital. It's also about putting in the board process, the governance, the operational excellence that needs to happen to become an attractive, organization. So I've been dabbling in a little bit of both, but definitely spending a little bit more time on kind of working towards the hands-on approach where I can, because I think, look, I've been mentored just like the rest of us have, and I've seen a bunch of the other, Tweener Talks things you've been doing. We've all had a mentor at some point, and just like me, I've been mentored. I've had, people in, back in the day like you and others. It's important to be able to give back in the other ways too, because I do believe in the pay it forward. And, I've had that opportunity, so why not, be able to do it in some of those ways as well.
That's awesome. I have a lot of first time founders that kind of say, well, why should I have a board? And that's an easy answer. But then they're kind of like, well, what kind of things can the board help me with? So as when you're wearing your board hat and you're in one of these things, like what are some of the tactical things you're helping the founder think through?
Yeah, well, that's it's a little bit all over the place depending on the organization that we're working with. But one in particular that I'm working with right now, and those who look me up can see that one, where I'm the board chair. It's a lot of mentorship at the CEO level. A lot of CEOs, it's a very lonely place, and they don't really understand what it actually takes from an operationalizing of an organization, whether you're an individual founder or you have multiple people in the organization. Look, 5 or 6 people, you're real at that point if you're working with. And a lot of people have not come up through those ranks, don't understand where the mentorship for that actually happens in order to build, scale, and grow, and even get into a point of raising funds. So I'm spending a lot of time with helping them kind of operationalize what does revenue need to look like, what types of things, not just what your governance rules need to be or bylaws and that kind of stuff, but also looking at structurally what processes and standard operating procedures you should start thinking about when you're sub $1 million, 250, whatever, versus what happens when you hit the million and you get to 5. And having lived through all that, it's really important from a board perspective to kind of help the staging of where that goes. And it's fun because I enjoy working with these founders who have a great understanding of the space that they're in, but then don't necessarily understand what happens post. And there's a lot of loss like in conversation and translation that happens there. And in today's world, it's like if you can lean on, okay, great, you're an expert in whatever B2B SaaS solution you're building. That's awesome. But let me help you about how do you actually operationalize that? Because through my career, I've bounced through different industries. So it's not that I just knew one. It was really about how do you operationalize the business. So that's really, on the board side, it kind of leans depending on what the needs are. And there are some startups that don't even know how to go develop, the product. And I've got teams that I've worked with, for years offshore that it's like, let me make an introduction for you and like help you with how do you build this thing.
Yeah. Cool. So you can kind of go from zero to exit, basically.
Zero to exit
and having help them think through the skills there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask what category you're most interested in, but I think you just kind of answered that. It seems to be like B2B SaaS. Obviously, ed tech is where you've got probably the most experience in the last 10 years. Any, so I guess you would probably avoid anything that's like you wouldn't do consumer or anything like that. Or?
Not necessarily. I've lived in those worlds. Obviously, been in channel advisor with you back in the day, and even when I was at CDW, we were in the retail hardware space. So I've got a good understanding of supply chain as well. One of the ones that I'm on the board now is actually a hardware software play in the manufacturing space. And it's a fit for me just purely, yes, it's a B2B software play, but it's also in the supply chain space, right? And having spent a lot of time there and understanding what actually happens when you have to move things through the supply chain. Yes, B2B is typically where I've leaned most of my career on the SaaS side. But I will also say what's really interesting to me now is just how people are leveraging AI. And having now just spent the last year plus building onto a AI company and really taking that to high scalability, it's really exciting to kind of look at those types of companies to see how they're leveraging the technology as opposed to just being another GPT. That to me is not exciting. And I will tell everybody who's listening right now, people aren't getting excited by that out in the investor world either.
They call them wrappers, just like a very thin layer between, just a chat bot on top of the.
Yeah, correct. Like if you're building an agent, that's not exciting anymore because it's really, yes, it was maybe 2 years ago when this first came out. But now it's like truly, how do you build the re-ranking models? Like how do you build everything that sits in between and having these RAG architectures for the geek that are out there that want to understand. Like I just spent, a year plus, working around these environments. It's really super cool when you know how to throw your data warehouse under these things and watch it process that data and how fast it works. That's getting exciting to me. And especially what we're starting to see in that space. As you know, Scott, like in talking to a lot of these companies 6 months ago, a lot of these things didn't even exist.
I know.
And it's going to be really exciting to kind of see what the next year has and how they're leveraging tech that didn't exist 6 months ago. So that's actually getting me a little bit more excited in some of the companies that I've been exploring working with is really around how are you leveraging AI as opposed to, hey, we're just another AI company.
Yeah, we're seeing, and I'm in that same Tweener Times I mentioned Keebler Health, where they, these two guys or three founders had an idea, and within 18 months they've just like off to the races. It's usually is a founder that has a deep subject matter expert, some kind of data that they can, it's like either exclusive or they know where to find this data. And if you train on that data, it gives you a bit of a network effect because you now your solution learns faster than everyone else's. And then just like a mindset to go fast and and then also to be wildly efficient. So it's really interesting. You and I have probably raised, I don't know how much between us, but a lot of money. And it gets kind of, you end up spending all your time at, once you get to like 5 million in revenue.
And now the time, like it's just changed on how fast you can do this and how inexpensively you can do this, because I've heard you talk about it. I've talked about it too, and just some of the businesses I've been a part of, where it used to take millions and millions and millions of dollars to do these things. You're doing at a fraction of the cost now because you've got all of these other platform tools that you could just layer on that we didn't see 6 months ago, a year ago, and a lot of them are open source, and that's the one thing to those that are listening that are trying to build their companies, right? Like you can look at tools now that are open source that will cost you little to nothing to build on top of your data warehouses and your knowledge bases, like you've seen with, some of these others. And, taking advantage of that is huge in today's environment. And now that is one of the things that I'm watching as I'm looking at some of these companies. Like, how are you really architecting? And are you architecting in a way that's going to be efficient and scalable, and that it's not going to cost a ton of money later just because your prototypes are like all pie in the sky? And now, that's one of the things that I'm looking for, because clarity in that is going to be king.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, so you're going to be on our selection committee. What's your advice to some of these? And these are all pretty early stage.
Yes.
And I think everyone's a first-time entrepreneur. I actually didn't look at it from that angle. And but anyway, what's your recommendation? So they're going to be there. We're going to be in studio, and it's going to be they're going to be up against another company. So, and you're going to be one of the selection committee members. What's your advice to these entrepreneurs for
how to win us over to try to get to the end result here? There's a few, points that I'll make, and I'll try not to make this, too long, but I'll make it, kind of summarize it a little bit. There are a lot of great ideas out there. And one of the biggest things I've seen with a lot of entrepreneurs is just making it too complex for everybody to understand what that idea is. So the more you can make that value prop simple and really understanding what it is and the problem that you're trying to solve is going to be critically important. And not just trying to reinvent the wheel to reinvent the wheel. And so, when I've seen that is like really kind of how you focus on the business and not just what the product is and the solution you're probably trying to solve is critically important. And just a lot of the things that I look at, because, we all like cool tech. We're all in the tech space, but investors and people that are looking to participate in rounds and things like that are really truly looking about the market and how you're trying to solve that problem. And that's one of the things, that I look for from an advice perspective is like, do you have the right signals, right, to show that there's a market there? And it's not just about, one of the other pieces of advice, it's not just about your TAM SAM. It's like, do you have a wedge? Like, do you have something that makes you so different that it's not just about that cool, I've got this $1 billion market, that I'm going after. And I think, Scott, we've seen a lot of those, types of organizations. And if you can really drive a wedge into where you're working and you have and understand your ideal customer profile, a lot of times, I've said to a lot of entrepreneurs and early stage startups, it's like, hey, look, if you know who that ICP is, then start talking to them. So what I want to see also advice is that you have been talking to your customers. And I always say this, feedback is a gift. You may not like it, but for, early advice for people is you can't talk to enough customers early enough. And even as you get later stage, this is advice for everybody too, you should still be talking to your customers. And I think a lot of people forget, like, we have a market, we've got sales, we don't need to talk to them anymore. Well, in actuality, you need to.
It's funny you say that. I was mentoring this guy in Europe, and he's got like a $10 million e-commerce kind of solution company. And he's like, growth is slowed, and I don't know why. And it's like, well, when's the last time you talked to 10 customers? And he like literally blushed, and he's like, 2 years.
Exactly.
I was like, you know what I'm going to say? He's like, he put his head down in shame. He's like,
even if you're building a new product within a core set of products that you have, you still need to get that feedback, because you don't want to invest all of this money in building something that is just going to fall flat, right? So advice to entrepreneurs, it's the same thing when you're building your first product and you're trying to launch. So if you can build that wedge and you know who it is, talk to them, because I want to see what the initial addressable market is. And this is probably a term that a lot of people haven't heard before, but it's like, I know that I can address a certain subsegment of a client that, to me, is one of the things that's important, and I've learned through the PE kind of world, is really knowing that you can get to that customer profile in an initial market if you're about to go expand. And so it's the same thing that happens when you're in early stage. So the advice is like, just don't talk about TAM, like really think about it down into the layers of how do you get that market share, and that you're thinking about how do you scale the business, as opposed to, hey, we have this cool little niche. And to your point, it's kind of like, hey, I haven't talked to them in 2 years. Well, if you should be going every day talking to your customers. Yeah. And then, one of the last things I'll say just from a piece of advice is, as you build, team is important, and you can't do everything alone. And even at scale, as a 3-time CEO, I've learned that there's no way I could do it alone. So as things evolve and market shift, you have to lean on people. And so even as a solo founder, you can actually reach out to other people and surround them, which is your boards, your advisors, your mentors. And I think a lot of people forget about that too, about how they can lean on resources in the community, yourself, myself, others who have been there, kind of done it. And advice is don't be afraid to ask. And I think a lot of people are afraid because they don't want to be told no. And we've all been told no a gazillion times. And so, lastly, just don't be afraid to ask, because it shouldn't be a lonely place, but we sometimes make it a lonely place.
Awesome. That's some great advice. It's going to be fun seeing you in the studio. Any last thoughts for folks? I think the audience for this is largely going to be some of our contestants and other founders out there. Any last advice?
Yeah, last advice is, first off, this is an awesome opportunity for everybody that's listening, out there and that's participating in this. Nothing's been really done like this before. So I give you and Robbie a lot of props, for what you guys have been doing, not only with just the Tweener Fund and everything else, but this is a really cool, fun, idea, for it. But
it'll either be great or terrible. It'll have a binary outcome.
This is one way or the other. I lean towards great.
We'll see. Yeah.
If you're pitching, this is the thing I'll close with. If you're pitching, take all of the feedback seriously. Because even though the investors may pass and Tweener may pass on this opportunity, it's still probably going to open doors for you later. And because you're going to have a level of exposure and building some relationships that you didn't have the day before. And then taking full advantage of that opportunity, is going to be in your best interest at that point. So I'm excited to see kind of what happens here and, how it all works.
Awesome. Well, thanks for volunteering to do this, Anthony. We appreciate it. Absolutely. And we will see you live in the studio.
Looking forward to it.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Good luck, everybody.
That's a wrap on this Meet the Judges episode. Now you know the minds behind the decisions, the investors and industry leaders who will be putting these startups to the test. As Tweener Madness kicks off, they'll be asking the tough questions, making the tough calls, and deciding who advances in the bracket, all leading up to the finals in early April. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single matchup. And if you want to follow along with all things Tweener Madness and the Triangle startup scene, head on over to tweenertimes.com. Also, if you're thinking about launching your own podcast or want to bring professional production to your brand, check out earfluence.com. The competition is about to begin, and we'll see you soon in the next episode.